Good evening, Your Grace. How are you?
Doing fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing fairly well. It's been a pretty good day. I have breath in my lungs, so I cannot complain. I am going to give just a quick little recap, some housekeeping for our viewers. If anybody is watching and would like to ask questions, by all means, submit them into the comment box area. We may or may not be able to get to all of the questions, and so if we cannot, it's not personal, I promise. But we'll do our best, and please try to keep your questions on topic also, if at all possible. I think that kind of covers everything. So without further ado, uh, Duke Paul of Bellatrix, I'm going to pass this off to you. If you'll give us just a little intro about yourself and take the floor.
Thank you. I've been around for a long time. I joined the society in 1971, or 70 rather. Um, I think I was a Duke by 72. And I've slowly been working on my system of fighting ever since. And the further I go, the more I know about it, and the more I don't know about it, or realize that I don't know about it. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the Bellatrix snap, which is commonly called the flat snap. Um, I never did like that name, but it's too common, so okay. So what I want to talk about a little bit first, because this is not going to be just a technical talk just about the snap. I want to go spread out just a little bit. So when I say system and I say style, I really should define what I mean by that. So a system is a collection of techniques, methodologies, and tactics. The techniques allow you to do things. The methodology tells you how you're going to employ them, and the tactics tell you when, where, and what. And I would like to make my system cohesive and complete and the best I can possibly make it. So I just don't include techniques at random in the system. I will certainly steal from anybody I feel has a neat technique that fits my criteria. I will give them credit, but I don't just grab them off the wall. And the criteria I have, the three basic ones, I will not include a technique in my system unless it's biomechanically safe and optimal. The technique must also be useful against the highest level of competition. That doesn't mean it's a magic wand that you can kill Duke so-and-so with. It means if you get good enough, you can use that technique at that level of fighting. And the technique must be usable by a 5 foot tall, 100-pound fighter. In other words, the techniques don't require superior strength, superior speed, superior agility. They'll give you mainly what you're missing, but they allow you to play at an effective level if you're not really fast, really strong, really agile, and so forth. And some of the more detailed criteria that I use to select these weapons or techniques and tactics, we've already talked about the biomechanical safety and optimal. Another one is time. So time is a very important thing in fighting because time basically is what you have to control if you're going to be effectively fast. So if you have the techniques must either add to time to make you a little bit faster or subtract it from your opponent to make you effectively faster. It should allow you to have little things that allow you to gain the advantage. I think that's what they call tempo. That's the best definition I could come. I interviewed a lot of people and nobody really came up with a real definite thing. But basically it's something that gives you an advantage. For instance, if I can stand outside of range and hit you in the next shot, that's an advantage. Position, and that's exactly what that advantage is in that case. The position I'm in makes me effective, but it lowers my risk because you can't hit me. Um, and then I have a technique, which I will tell you later, how you get in range. And the last thing I do is the techniques have to be cohesive. Uh, all my techniques have to fit together. For instance, I have 4 basic techniques and dozens of variations. But those things all fit together. I can throw a snap and I can turn it into one of 3 or 4 other different things. And I can turn that into 5 or 6 other different things and that into several other different things. Let me give you just an example. So I'm throwing a snap. Okay, but I'm throwing it from out of range and I'm deciding I'm not going to get in range to hit my opponent. So it's going to miss. So this thing here will go right into a Molinet, which will go into an offside teardrop, which will come back to a teardrop. And all those techniques fit together. And it makes it very difficult on my opponent, for my opponent to know what and where I'm attacking. And those things are just ungodly fast when you start stringing them together, because each technique is a power speed generator. And then if you feed that output into another power speed generator and then another one, I mean, there's a reasonable limit. I can sit there and wave my sword around very, very fast. And eventually you'll step back and just look at me. And then when I stop, you'll hit me. So I don't do that. Okay, now that's my system. Now my style. Different people can use the same system, but have different styles. For instance, my son Duke Stefan is really fast, hand speed and foot speed. I'm fairly slow in both. Brian's somewhere in the middle. He's almost as fast as Stefan, and he's close to being as strong as I am. So we all have different ways of doing it. Interesting thing, some of the techniques that I've actually developed, like the way I teach the snap, I didn't develop that until well after I started stopped playing Sword and Shield. So Brian, who grew up with it, can do it a lot better than I can. And he can do it with both hands. So he likes to fight inside with 2-sword. I like to fight at the medium range. So different styles within the system. But if in my school, your style has to fit in the system. Everything has to be to meet all these criteria. And then now I want to talk about what most people think of as the snap, which isn't. So when I came into the society, I was already an accomplished martial artist. And it was pretty much, how do I make these swords move? How do I make these shields move to be effective? So the snap came on very, very quickly. It's basically like a sidearm throw from a pitcher. In the early days, it just literally came this low and was a sidearm pitch. It was much, much faster and much, much harder than anything anybody else was doing. And that sort of started the arms race. Then I made my mistake. My first attempt at a fighting manual was back in the 70s. And it was back in the days of mimeographs, and actually the pictures in that manual were life drawings. One of my friends was an artist, and I actually posed for the pictures. And I made the mistake. The mistake I made was I included a picture of this one useful little technique, but it was only useful in one particular spot. And that was if you were fighting somebody who was on their knees and they kept letting their shield drop down, you could set the sword on your shoulder, open up your hand, and then snap it down on them like that by closing your hand and levering it off your shoulder. That is not a snap. I never meant it to be a snap. It isn't a snap, but it became the snap for most of the eastern part of the country because people didn't read the words underneath that drawing. So we're going to get into teaching you the real snap now. One of the things that when I work on power generation in the body, My practice is to eliminate the smaller, weaker muscles from the chain that causes a blow to happen. I start with the fingers, then I go to the wrist, and then I go to the elbow, and then I go to the shoulder. And I try to get rid of those as much as possible. So everything is core based. Been pretty successful at it. And the thing that people thought was the snap is not core based at all. It's finger based. The interesting thing is, and the thing is that if you do the snap correctly the way I do it, you literally don't have time to close your hand. It's too fast. Another example. Okay, full speed snap. You simply don't have time to close your hands. So what I use instead of the hand is I use an upper body weight shift. That's one thing. So the core takes your upper body and moves it about half an inch to one side, basically towards 10:30 or 11 o'clock. The other thing I do is body weight dropping, which I basically let my weight slide through my hips towards my front knee, which bends as the weight comes on it. And then torso rotation. I mean, I was the one that came up with torso rotation way back when. And then I realized 30 years later that I wasn't doing that. I was doing the upper body shift. Let me show you a little bit about that. This little thing here is a really good training tool. Basically, I took a towel and tied it up real hard. So it gives me a little bit of weight on the end of a rope. And I'm going to spin this around over my head. Now watch my hand. My hand stops moving after a bit. What I'm doing is my core is doing everything. So the core is always leaning opposite the thing, and it just follows it around, leaning away, essentially pulling in along the rope to the center of rotation. And that's the same thing I do with swords. The other thing, which is sort of like heresy, of course, when everybody thought the snap was like this, everybody wanted to hold the sword with the first thumb and forefinger. I hold them with the last two fingers. The reason I do that is because the way the body works, there are chains of muscle and connective tissue that run around the body that essentially act as a unit. And two of those chains, they come out from the backs of the little fingers. They go down under your arm, and then they spread out over your upper back. And those tie in to some of the big chains of muscle coming up from your core. So when you activate that network with the bottom fingers, you get your entire back working for you in the core. If you hold it like this, these lines come up to the front instead of the back. And they're not particularly useful in what I do. To make that a little bit easier, what I've done is I've come up with a lanyard which attaches in front of the basket hilt. And I can put my hand through all the way, and you'll see it grabs in back of the wrist, which takes the wrist out of the equation, which is what I want to do. You can also use it as a full hand trigger where you don't put the thumb in. It doesn't work quite as well, but it still works pretty well. And if you're fighting two sword and you got your other sword strapped on, that's about the only way you can get into the sword. I'll say, so now we're starting to get the foundations of the snap. So I have a stance that I advocate for doing this. Okay, the body has to be balanced. If you have any kind of lean, any direction, you really can't rotate, and you can't do the weight shift either. So if you're in a stance that's hunched forward or leaning back, it doesn't work. So what I do is feet are like this. So I've got the heel of the back foot on this side of the line between the feet, and I've got the toe of the other foot. They're about shoulder width, and they're angled at about 30 degrees from front. What this does is I can push any direction from this stance, whereas if I have both feet lined up, it inhibits the rotation of the body. And that front foot being straight, you have no lateral push when you're trying to do things. So I've got my feet there, and the rest of it's like a horse stance, just like you're sitting on a horse or sitting on the back of a chair backwards. Your knees are just unlocked and you're balanced. You're about shoulder width. You don't really want a big wide stance like this unless you're in a shield wall. Actually, if you're planning on moving some, you want a little narrower stance because it gives you a longer way you can step. You want your hips balanced, your upper body back just a little bit, shoulders way back. And then you have, instead of being square on like this, you turn your body at about a 30-degree angle. So the line through your shoulders goes from about 10:30 or 11 o'clock to 4:30, 5 o'clock on that side. What this does, it does two things. One, it's a surprisingly good defensive stance. If you're using a stance that is square to your opponent, the edge of your shield is out here. If you use it like this, I'm over here, and you have to get around that thing that's way over there to do it, and I can come out that way really easy, faster than I can with this thing. I don't sword block. Sword blocks are for emergencies. So just, I'm not teaching the shield tonight, but the shield is in here like this, my arm is here like this, the hand comes up here like that, it's tilted out a little bit. So when I block with the base of my little finger, and I just punch like that. But the sword, so the sword is here. The shoulder, the elbows move back far enough that the shoulder is locked by the elbow. So when the body moves, the arm moves. There's no delay whatsoever. The elbow is high because part of the power or speed comes from the elbow coming across. It helps twist the body, getting a little bit of the rotational with everything else I'm doing. The hand is either palm down or palm up, depending on how you want to do it. You don't have to hold it right there. You can hold it up a bit. You can hold it out a bit. You don't really want to hold it forward. Now, if you're a sword blocker, you're doing that all the time, you can do that sword blocking without putting your hand forward. You just leave the tip there. So now you've got the best of both worlds. But I still don't like the stance of square arm because you don't have that rotation. It's hard to get the body, the little push from the upper body getting moved in different places. So when you're swinging, you want the hand to turn over till it's palm forward or palm up before it comes off the shoulder. So slowing it way down like this, and then the hand comes out like that. Now, surprisingly, in the rotation, the muscles that are really doing the work are not, as you suspect, the legs. They're actually the big muscles on this side of your back. Because muscles don't push, they pull. So there is a lot of help from the leg, but it's that other side of the body that's doing the pulling also. Now, when you're actually throwing the snap, all these things happen at once. My body, I use my core to make I'm going to exaggerate the motion. The body shifts towards about 10:30, 11 o'clock. What this is doing is it's actually pulling the sword towards its own hilt, which is the easiest way to make it move. So the body is moving just a little bit that way. At the same time, I'm bending that front knee and the weight is dropping. So you get a double whammy. You get your upper body being thrown that way and dropping down at the same time. So you get a lot of weight, hundreds of times with the sword weights going that direction. And the sword goes very quickly. All this happens at once. I mean, there's no turn your hips and then let the sword come out. Basically, if you turn your hips and you haven't moved your upper body yet, the lower body supplies no energy whatsoever. Everything has to go at once. And besides the advantage of getting a lot harder and faster blows off of this, it has the other advantage of it makes it more difficult to actually give a tell to your motion. You see a lot of people when they're fighting like this and they go like this to cock their swords, or they shift the angle or something like this, or they lean forward. These are all tells. But the things I've just shown you don't have tells because they all happen at once. There's no one part of it that moves first. Everything moves. Now I said you could have the sword in different positions. So here's what here's your plus minus on that. I like this one here because you got the most power. The physics of it make this the most easily to. This is the position that is most easy to put power into the blade. You can raise it up like this and pretty much nothing else changes. You can hold it out to the side a little more, and that's pretty good too, because you can get all that power applied. But the physics says that the longer the radius of rotation, which from the center of your body to the balance point of the sword, the longer the radius of rotation at the start of the movement, the harder it is to get it moving. So as you move out, it becomes slightly harder to actually start the sword swing. Now, if you have it in front like this, basically you're going to wreck your wrist eventually. Unless you pull that back and cock it and swing it, this coming around with the forearm and the wrist is going to likely injure you. Okay, now you notice that I advocate this shield put forward. There's reasons for this. One, you have the back leg to push, and it leaves your hand back further, so you can get more power right at the beginning of the motion. The reason that the sword foot forward stances were invented, or people started using them, was basically that because nobody had one of the techniques I'm going to talk about later called a slide step, which allows you to move forward in the middle of your swing. So you start the swing and halfway through your body moves forward. By that time, the sword is already powered. You're not pushing it or anything like that. It's just happening. And the body just scoots along with it. And one of the disadvantages of having that front foot, besides losing some of the power generation, is it's really easy to commit a tell, to tell your opponent what you're doing. The reason they went that way, because they didn't have the slide step, which I was going to talk about, is they didn't want to come up and start and get in range and then start fighting, because if you're getting in range, your opponent may be ready before you are, and even if not, you're playing a who's quickest game, and I don't play that game. I'm not that quick. So what happens is they get on the edge of range just so they can just so they can't quite reach the target here like this. But if they have that foot forward, then they can, as they lean forward, they can now reach the target. Unfortunately, what you get is a lot of this. They do it real slow, so they think you don't see it. There's an interesting little, I saw a little clip on TV once that they were interviewing an elephant keeper who was washing an elephant. And you can see behind her, there's another elephant who is creeping slowly towards one of the other hoses. And the idea was he's going to pick up the hose and squirt her. And she catches sees him out of the corner of her eye, turns around and says, bad elephant, and it leaves. And she turns back to the camera and says, they don't think you can see them if they move really slowly. And I think that's some of the attitude about that leaning thing. Okay, so going back to the snap itself, and going back to the criteria for selection that I've talked about earlier, biomechanically, it's as safe and as optimum as I can make it. And believe me, I have been working on it for a long time. I have some injuries now, but none of them are from fighting. All of them are from judo. And I got some pretty good ones too. I'll be having my second back operation in a couple of months. It's useful at all levels. You could use it on any level. You can kill a Duke with a snap just as well as you can kill a newbie. Anyone can use it. So if you do the technique properly, I don't care how big or small you are, you can get plenty of power and plenty of speed out of it. It's efficient because it's basically a most efficient movement I could come up with. And that gives you a little bit of a time advantage. There's no wind up. There's just all of a sudden it happens. There's no extra new movements involved. You don't have to move with something to set it up. You see a lot of people, when they're here like this, they'll move the sword back when they swing to get more power. I was teaching a class once and somebody asked me if I had any offside techniques for the first blow. And I said I did, but I didn't think they were very good, so I don't use them much. I use them as a distraction. And they said, well, I have one. And I said, well, show me. And they're here like this. And they went, okay, so this thing here is one of the bigger tells you'll ever see. Just because you think it's fast doesn't mean everybody else does. And it allows for free flow between the techniques. The snap has like 6 variations. Some of it just things that are added on to the end when it doesn't hit. So it very cohesive and fits together with the rest of the system. Now, if you're a larger fighter, you probably want to and you're going to do this style of the snap. You probably want to migrate more towards the body shifting. If I did it when I threw the snap earlier, you probably didn't even see it because I only moved about ½ inch, but I move very fast that ½ inch. So if you got a good core, that's your game. If you're smaller, you want to maybe have a blend that goes very much more towards the rotation because you get every power from every source you can get. So, Vesper, are there any questions at this point?
There actually are questions at this point. Question from Ingegard, actually. How can the sword help with movement in small steps?
Well, one of the things I do is the first thing that moves is in any of my techniques, sword. Let me tell a story about that. I actually saw this somewhere. It's an old joke. A pig and a chicken are going to open a restaurant, and they're discussing what type of restaurant they're going to open. And the chicken says, "I'm going to serve breakfast." Pig says, "I won't do that." Chicken says, "Why not?" Pig says, "Because you're involved, but I'm committed." And when you're doing an initial attack, you're talking about your sword moving, the only thing in that whole equation that's a pig, be the threat, is the sword. Everything else, any other movement is a tell. So what has to move first? The sword. And that's what my next stuff is based on. We'll get to this a little later, but let me show you just a couple things. And I'm going to do a series of these, so we'll use this more later. You can make the sword move you in various directions. So you've already applied power like that. Your body is moving towards the direction over there if you want to go that way. So you power the sword. It's already completely powered, and you let that residual energy help you to step over here. There's another technique I have here, which comes around here, comes back this way. Starts after a snap. So when I pull the sword back, and right now it's moving fast and it's pulling me towards its tip. So right at this point where it's pulling sideways, my body is actually leaning the other way. The lean is so small that you probably won't notice it. So just after that tip goes past that point, the pull that way disappears. Your body is leaning that way. So if you just take your weight off that foot, it will move you over here. If you wait a little longer, now it's over here, the body is leaning this way, you can actually step this way. Let me just take note of just how late in the sword movement that step occurs. It's all the sword is all the way around to here. Okay, that's sufficient.
I believe it is. We do have another question, if you would like for me to propose it. Could you show some examples, or what are some examples of variants of the flat snap?
Sure. Okay, so if I did a regular snap, it would be come in right like this. This I call a right cross. So you swing the blow towards the other side of your opponent, and you don't let it come out flat. You try to make it come out vertical. And it's a little curve that goes that way. And as the sword goes out, the centrifugal force starts pulling the tip, and the tip starts going down and down and down and down. If you time that correctly, and you move a little bit with a step that it'll let you do, the sword can actually come down right behind the shield, especially in my style, because if you're fighting somebody in my style, because we hold our shields like this, and we come out and punch like that. So if the punch happens a little bit early, the tip will be coming over that thing, or be coming this way, but it'll drop down right past the shield. Very disconcerting. What was the question again?
The question was if you could show some examples of variants off the flat snap.
Okay, that's the one variant. What that's good for is I use that in conjunction with the slide step, which is pretty much what it says it is, as a counter fire. So I'm blocking my opponent's attacking position. So here's another one. This is one of the nastier ones. You come in and it looks like a snap, but notice the position of my hand. My hand's a lot lower than it should be. Because if I throw a snap, it should be up here. But it's so damn fast, you can't really, coming forward, you got to react to it. And the tip is still up high like it should be, but it draws the attention of the opponent. So what happens is this, it comes down here and then is an offside teardrop. So it's just comes down here. Okay, that's one. This one here, I swing my snaps like this. Now look at the angle of the blade. Notice the tip is a little lower than my hand now. What's going to happen is this. It's a Molinet, which comes right over and comes back. The interesting little thing about the Molinet, I realized that if you do it just right, you don't have to pull your hand back, because just as the tip starts going back that way, your hand is pushing forward like that. All you have to do is maintain that push forward. It'll come right around for you. Okay, this one is called a shallow S. Going further, way further in my series, I have a thing called an S shot, which it comes here like this, comes over the other shoulder and comes back. This one's a shallow one, so it doesn't go that far back. Again, it comes slightly up, but then it comes back this way. So it's just, that's a real neat one. If you really want to get in on somebody and play in close, this is the way you get in. There are a couple others, but I think those are generally the ones you want to use. Any more questions?
Always more questions. One question is, I am reading it to you, so if I look away, I'm not being rude, I promise. I'm just trying to get it right. What are some considerations with this technique for those of the sinister persuasion, aka lefty?
It works the same. There's no real difference.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that, oh, just kidding. Do you hit through your opponent?
I do not. There's two problems with this, and I was going to cover it later, but now works just fine. There's two things wrong with hitting through. One is the quickness at which the force is actually applied to the target. So let's assume I have 100 pounds of force coming in there like this. Now, if I hit the target and swing through, it says, let's say it takes a whole second to deliver all the power from that. Okay, so we have 100 pounds per second delivered. If I come in like this and it hits, and just like a bullwhip, and it maybe does it in a tenth of a second, then that's 1,000 pounds per second force. So the quicker you can deliver the force and get out of there, the more of a shocking impact you get. And the other thing is, if you're pushing, so you swung through, so right here, you impacted the target and you swing through to there, the time from when you hit the target all the way back until you're past that hit mark is extra time. And it's extra time while your arm is sitting out in front of you. Later on, I teach where you start paying attention to the rebound, and you don't wait for it. You don't want to get this where it rebounds and then you pull it back. It's you hit and it comes back. I mean, you can gain a half second on your opponent right there just doing that. So that's the two reasons. One, it doesn't, I mean, the same amount of power is applied. It's just, if you aim more towards the surface, it's applied in a much shorter time, and you get a shocking impact. So if I was going to, this is one of my friends, and I was going to hit him on the shoulder, same force applied like this, it might move around a bit, but he would probably care for that a lot more than that, which is what I'm going for. Any more?
None at this moment.
Alrighty. So let me see where we are in my thing. A couple little things in the snap. One, when your weight shift to that front knee, you actually want that knee to bend. I see a whole lot of people who throw a snap and that front leg straightens. You've just taken about 50% of your power off. The other thing is I see people leaning forward when they throw. So you're here like you throw the snap and you end up here. one of the things that I really try to avoid in my whole system is commitment. Now, commitment doesn't mean I'm really going to go to practice every day and do my century drill every day. It's you have just predisposed your body to move in that direction. So if you want to go anywhere else, you have to come back from that. It takes time, and that's not something you want to do. I actually, when I'm teaching, I talk in using count as a measure of time. So a count is this or this. And if you lean forward, you just cost yourself a whole count, maybe more. If I were doing this, I'd be all the way around here before you got back to your position. The other thing is sort of an interesting, you've seen a whole lot of people teach you to throw a snap and you push up with the hand so you can get over around the shield and get that point. Well, when I was doing my book, I had several long talks with one of my squires, who, among other things, used to be a rocket scientist, literally. He used to work for jet propulsion laboratories in California. Knows his physics really, really well. So when you're throwing a snap, you have a rotational vector. A vector is force moving in a direction. You can have straight lines and you can actually have rotation. So the snap is essentially a rotation because you're rotating your body and the sword is just coming off a tangent like this. If you push that down, you actually increase the speed of the rotation. If you push up, you take all the speed away. So you're throwing that thing and you want to do it nice and fast, you push your hand up and the sword literally dies right when it hits. And then you can try to talk your opponent into taking the shot. So you don't want your head going forward when you're doing this because you don't want to end up forward like that, as I was saying. So when you're throwing the blow, you want your weight to go that way because that's pulling the sword down its length, but you don't want your body going like this. So you let your body shift through its hips to maintain that upright stance. When you start doing this, it's going to feel like you're throwing your shoulders back. You're not really, it's just your hips are going out from under you. But that rotation, being able to rotate is really important in this game for moving your sword around. And if you lean in any direction, you can't, your power to rotate drops precipitously. Just try it. Just stand up nice and straight and rotate your body around, then lean over and try it. And it doesn't feel good a little bit. So one of the things I wanted to point out, I have my critical points here. The hip and body move at the same time. You don't turn your hip and let the body catch up. You've lost all the power of the hip. So that all moves like that. For those of you that have taken karate, it's like doing a step punch. Now you do a step punch in karate, you step out, you leave your hip back, and then you power it through that way. Beginners don't do it that way. They do it like this. Well, when swords are involved, you do it like the beginners do, because I brought my swords to my karate school way back when. And in those days, I was using pretty damn heavy swords, up around 4 pounds. And so put him in the stance position, and he swung it, and he almost fell over backwards because his hips went out so much further, and the weight of the sword almost took him over backwards. The sword hand should not move forward until the palm is up or forward. So you have to turn it over. You have to turn it over on your shoulder until your palm is either forward or up like this. Otherwise, you're coming out there, you're pushing it forward, and then you have to snap it around with your wrist. That's not a good prescription for lifelong fighting. I I mentioned the sword, you should use the sword like a whip. It's like literally like a bullwhip. So this is a demonstration. I only do it like once every several months because when I figured out I could do it, it was at Penzic one year. And I must have done it 100 times that week. And it took about 6 months for the tendons in the back of my hand to recover from that. It's not a good idea. So what I can do, full speed snap, nothing's in front of me, because I'm going like this. And all the power is delivered to whatever the hell, whatever would have been there. But when I'm doing it at nothing, it does pull the tendons in the back of my hand, so I'm really careful about that these days. Okay, so I think we covered the snap pretty much. You'll have a chance to ask more questions later about it. So if you didn't get yours in, we'll stay around. The first of the associated techniques that go with this is the slide step that I keep mentioning. And using this thing has some really nice benefits. You're stepping forward during a swing. So the first thing that moved in the equation was the sword, and that's the pig. That's the only threat. When I'm throwing the snap, all the power is already put into the sword right there. Basically, I'm just bang, and it's gone. And from then on, it's coasting really fast. And right there, your weight has gone to your front leg. Your weight has gone to your front leg, and what you do is, as the foot bends, or the knee bends, you let it go as far as it goes, then you catch up with it with your foot, and you pull the back one up so you don't end up doing splits. Do it the other way around. So as your weight's coming on the foot, the knee is bending, and right here where the heel starts to come off the ground, you just let it go forward. And the timing on that is, you're right here, and then you just go. The sword's already powered, so you'll be all been told, don't step forward to the sword swing. You're not stepping forward with it. You've already powered the blade, so it doesn't detract anything from it. That thing is just so useful. One of the things is it gives you a positional advantage. You are attacking from out of range. Your opponent cannot hit you without doing a movement in which they will commit themselves to some degree. So that gives you an advantage of lessening your risk while you do your business. The other thing it does is, remember I spoke about tempo being some kind of advantage you can gain through things? This gains you an advantage. If you're attacking from out of range, this is sort of what happens in your opponent's mind. Oh, they're out of range. Maybe they're not. Oh shit. And remember I said I trying to get ahead of my opponent. So count this way, count this way. Surprise alone can give you a whole count, or maybe two. Just depends how much you get screwed up. And it allows you to do that, coming out of range from a safe position and surprising your opponent. And then when you add on the variations and stuff, even worse. Okay, so the slide step, you can do it in different directions. So I'm straight back of it here. So I'm going to throw now the left-hander who spoke up earlier, if I was coming in on a right-hander, I would do a right cross and swing over here. If I'm doing a left-hander, I'll swing your sword hand over here. But you take your step with your foot in that direction, anywhere on the side where you can reach the opponent. So what I usually do is I come in just off the shoulder like this. And then the technique I haven't shown you, the single hip, you come in here like this. I can go way the hell out there and step in like this, close enough, just close enough so that my sword will hit. Now when I do my return around here like this, I can turn in, I am now attacking them from their side. So they have a choice. You accept that attack from your flank, or you turn to face me. When you turn to face me, you incur a rotational momentum, and I'm going this way and you're going that way. There's also something called a stride step, because you take a stride with your back foot. It works pretty much the same way, it's just to the other foot. So again, you're out of range, you throw the blow. After you power the blow, you just let your foot step forward. It works, but it's slower, and the possibility of a tell is a lot greater, because some people will lift the foot off the ground a little too soon and stuff like that. So I tend not to do it. I do use it as an entry against great weapons, because what are you going to do? Okay, so the tactical considerations of this thing is, since you're entering range when your opponent's attention is focused on your sword, they're not really paying attention to where you are going. So you can end up in a very much more advantageous position while their attention and their defense are going on your sword. So for instance, if I've done that slide step and I'm going out that way, just off the thing, and I swing over here, where are their defenses going to be? And realize they have been surprised by me getting into range. So their defenses will likely, go like this. Okay, I have a whole bunch of things I can do to get down to the other side. One of the variations off that snap is that offside teardrop, which just got open. Since you're doing the snap, which if you're doing it right, you're already cocked as far as you want to go. When you're learning it, actually, you should overcock a little bit to really, because you feel better, and then you start learning it that way, and then you'll feel better doing it. It starts with a snap. Nothing moves except the sword. The first thing was the sword, so there's no tells. If you do it right, the first thing that moves is the sword. That's already a threat. That already grabs your opponent's attention. So tells are less likely. I already told pig and chicken story. Okay, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Okay, the next thing I want to get into is continuing attacks, but have any other questions come in?
We do have a few questions. Does range affect where you try to land your blade?
Yes, it does. This is, again, getting ahead of myself. Tactical considerations. It's really hard to get a kill on the first swing, no matter what's happening. It's even harder to get it when you're coming from out of range. But you can make your opponent react. So what I teach is the first blow, you don't come into range. I have another concept I teach called parallel circles. So there's two circles around my opponent. If I'm sitting on, my front foot is on the inner circle, I can actually hit them. Take a step back, and now I'm in the outer circle. I can probably hit their shield if I work at it. So I'm going to come in with my slide step from back here. And that's a hell of a place to start an attack, isn't it? You're nowhere near in range. Look at that. And you come in, and here you go. There's a sword. It's moving fast. Is it going to make it in? You gotta respect that. And then from here, then I'll go around and just stay in that outer circle until I want to come in for a shot that actually lands. Now, if you get too far out, you're simply not going to get to them. What I did personally, because one of the things I really teach and really emphasize in my training is learning how to read the flow of the fight. This is really important. And that's one of the two major purposes of the structured rhythmic slow work that I teach. This gets into a whole nother can of worms. But if you're watching the slow movement of a blow that is slowly evolving, you pretty much get the idea where it's going to hit. And that allows you to anticipate it in a certain to a certain degree. I once had one of my my students who had actually won a crown student's account, and I really worked with him a lot. I could read him like a book. And those little pauses that occur during fights, well, I would make sure those pauses occurred with us both in range. And I just stand there, okay? And I could literally feel him getting frustrated and sort of tensing up like this. And then he'd make the decision to swing at me, and he'd go like this, and I hit him. So that's something you can do. Actually, I pay attention to other sports because I'm interested in kinesthetics as a whole. And both volleyball and tennis are doing similar things to what I do with slower. What they do, since if you wait till the racket hits the ball or the spike hand gets the ball to move to where it's going to hit, it's already too late. So you have to read the body language to see where it's going to go. They give the people that are training goggles, and the top third of the goggles are opaque. So when the spiker goes up for the spike, they can only see the hand to hear. They can't see the hand anymore. So they're reading the body language. Same with the serve. And it works really well. Did I answer the question?
I believe you have. We do have another question though regarding shorter fighters. What can shorter fighters do to take advantage of using your technique that you're demonstrating?
Okay, well, shorter fighters, especially if you're women, have had this horrible thing perpetrated on them. You're being trained, you're newbie, you haven't done anything yet, and the person training you says, well, since you're short, you need a short weapon so you can handle it. And it's got to be really heavy so when you hit them, they'll take it. They don't mention that you will never hit them because you don't know how to make that thing move fast enough to do it. Or they'll say, you need a short weapon because you're short and you need to be able to handle it. And it's got to be really light so you can move it fast enough to hit. And they never mention that nobody will ever take your blows because your sword's too light. So what this does, the slide step allows you to get into range. Now, getting into range, that last thing I mentioned about getting into the outer circle, that's the game you play. You can't get all the way into range to hit something likely on your first step. So get in the place you want to be. And where you want to be is on that outer circle where you're in range of their shield, or maybe a little further out if they're really tall and have a long range. But in any case, you're not right up next to them. And you want to be on the corners. If instead of a circle you put around, you put a square, you want to be on a point of the square because that's not where they're aiming. They have to turn to engage you, and they will, but you can time those turns if you do things right. And the whole thing about short sword, there's just so many things that become common knowledge and sort of tribal custom in the SCA that just have no basis anywhere in fact. So like, how many people have told you that your sword shouldn't be able to hit the ground when you do that? If you're worrying about your sword hitting the ground when you do that, you have some other problems because swords don't go there. And if you have a sword that's this much shorter than mine and I'm a foot taller than you, you will never get into range. You have to have a sword that is long enough to give you the range you need to compete. I put a minimum of 36 inches on all my students, everybody. You know, the 5'2" and I have Last year, about this time, I had 3 people in my class who were over 6'8". All of them use the same size sword. If once they learn, they can go to a longer sword. Nobody ever wants to go down after you've learned how to do this, because it gives you range, and you have to learn how to use it. Yeah, I mean, it's not, you can't walk out there, grab a sword and fight with a longer sword. You have to learn how to use it. But longer swords work really well. The whole thing using body weight to move the sword around. When I'm doing one of the techniques I'll cover in my next broadcast, it's this, I call it the single hip. You've already struck a snap, you come around here and swing there. The way you power that is it's hit. You do sort of a little sideways curl with your arm to flip the tip back. At the same time, use your core to do a headbutt. And that headbutt, this just directs it. The headbutt supplies the power. So you hit here, and it's really fast. And once you learn how to do that little trick, you can play up with the big boys. That's about it on that.
That's
Oh,
wonderful.
one more thing. I like my swords light and for the people I'm teaching, light and tip balanced. So this thing, I get an 1.25 rattan, and then I take a piece of seat belt and I put it 16 inches down the front edge. If it's too light, I'll put something on the back edge, 6, 8 inches down the back, seat belt or leather or something like this, because it gives it not only a tip handle balance, it gives you a front edge, back edge balance. And it makes the sword much more lively. You just go up here with one of these swords, and you make it go around a corner, and it wants to go now. Okay, I'm done. Next question.
I believe that is it on our questions for now.
Okay, so I'm just going to give you a taste of the combinations and variations. I've pretty much done all I want to do with the snap and the slide step. If you think of another question later, go right ahead. But I just want to show you the combinations you can do with these things. So my major techniques, the snap, of course, is one of them. Once I've hit and I'm pulling the blade back, one of the major techniques is the teardrop. It's a teardrop that comes around the side like this. And it's thrown the same way. You flip the sword to the side, your hip turns a little bit, but you don't even think about it because it'll do it anyway. And you do that same little pull back, and it's quick. And you see these double taps? Same thing. What I did is I turned my body to shorten the backswing. Okay, the teardrop has all sorts of things. So I've hit the snap, I can come around the teardrop, and I can do that same thing where I came down the other side of that. I can hit, come back like this and go with the Molinet or the shallow S like that. I can go into the offside teardrop and extend that. So like this, I go to the offside teardrop, come around here and come back again. That's a scary little thing. I've never seen another combination that's that damn fast. First time I did it, I was trying to see if I could get my sword, how close I could be and get my sword through. I got it through, and it hit like it bounced off of my face where it could move. So just to give you an idea of that thing, this is what it looks like. Okay, I've come here. That's got like one too many things into it. So I don't know what I do with that. Now, if I'm going into that offside teardrop, I first categorize the offside teardrop as a secondary technique because you can't do it off right from the start. You have to have another technique that leads into it. But it's so versatile that I just promoted it. So you come down here like this. You can just come down there. You can come anywhere on this side here like this. you can actually come around like that, or you can come around here and go back into that. And you can do that off a teardrop that preceded that, or you can do it off a snap that you've done, and you can do it off the single hip that comes around like this. So the single hip is like here, you come around to here. And this is really probably the nastiest thing I've ever come up with. Going on that same old theme, you come across here like this, and one of the variants of the single hip is what I call a descending strike, just down like this. And you can pull that descending stripe into a teardrop, and that's just blindingly fast. So, and then you can go to shallow S's and everything like that. Wraps are an interesting thing. So I've come here and I've gone into the wrap. Now, when I teach a wrap, you have to lean forward a little bit to power the blade more. And the hand has to stop before the tip catches up with it, so it spins around the hand. So you've come through here, you've got the person saying, this is going to be a wrap, and then it turns back, which I call the X shot here, like that. I can do the S shot, which I referred to earlier. Same thing, you come up here, but you go over to this shoulder, and then you can hit anywhere you like, because you can pause a little bit right there to do it. You can do a fake X shot. So you come up here, and it's going to be just like an X shot, and you pull it back into a thrust. You take the thrust and turn it into a Molinet. You can just come up here like this and do a Molinet from the wrap. And this is a weird one called the spin. You step in, you go like this. Yeah, there's other ones, but I just those are the main ones. And all these techniques fit in with the other one. So it gets so they make you read the flow of the fight a little more, and so your decision making moves further and further and further along in the swing. The other thing principle I use is I try to get everything to look alike. So if I'm coming into a teardrop like this, I just hit coming into a teardrop coming this way. A variant of that is a high teardrop. So instead of letting your hand come down to your waist, you just let the tip drop and you leave your hand up by your shoulder. So this can come into another teardrop, or same motion you can come into a single hip. It changes right about here when your hand is halfway forward, which makes it tough. The single hip, well, you can't even tell in the teardrops. If I'm doing one of the variants of a teardrop, basically the only way you can figure it out is the angle of the blade and whether I'm going to get in close enough to hit you. And even then, there are some things I don't make the decision until even later. The single hip has, I think we figured out there's 19 variations that come through this point. So this is a full speed swing. It just came over your head, and it can be one of 19 different things. So it makes it very difficult for your opponent to plot what they're going to do because you can't tell. It looks exactly the same here. And this, when I do the one where I pull it back into the thrust, the point of that, when it's being pulled back, comes about that close to your face, your opponent's face. And that's when they got to make the decision. And then I'm back here, and here comes the thrust coming at you. And right about here can either be a thrust, or you can be here and turn into a Molinet. So it makes it really nasty to figure out what the hell you're doing for your opponent. Now, with all these dozens of variations, I don't tell people to learn them all. I say, know what they are, see which one feels good to you. They're all useful techniques. They're all they all fit in the system, so they meet all the criteria. But don't use all of them because you go nuts. So I think that's about it. So unless you have any more questions, I'm pretty much done.
You did amazing job. Thank you so much. I don't think we have any more questions at the moment, but as you said, you will be back with us again here in a couple weeks, so a week from next Monday, covering some new information.
Yeah, pretty much what I'm going to do, I'm using the techniques to um, expose you to other things that are going on, like how you pick out a technique, the tactics you use, strategies you use to employ your techniques, how they can fit together, how they can make the whole thing work better for you. So I'll probably be doing the teardrop and the single hip, maybe one, but probably both. And we'll get into the tactics of that, and maybe a little further afield on some subsidiary topics.
Perfect. So that is definitely something that everybody should keep an eye out for because you do not want to miss that. So thank you for being with us this evening, Your Grace.
Thank you, Vesper. I really appreciate your efforts in doing this.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful evening. And by all means, if people have questions, comment, send them out, or save them for the next episode, and we'll be sure to get to them.
Yes, you can also write questions to me at the Bellatrix Fighting School Facebook page. So I get
We
them.
can put a link up to that actually to make it really accessible and easy. So I'll go ahead and put that up this evening.
Yeah, and if it's got an interesting things, we'll give it back to you, and you can put it somewhere where they can see it.
Perfect. All righty. Well, I hope you have a wonderful evening. It has been a pleasure as always. And we will see you in a couple weeks.
Okay, thank you, Esther.
Bye.